You are correct, Dennis. Thank you so very much, as apparently I did not even have my mic fully on. I was just so excited to get everything going, and I did not fully have my mic on. So hopefully, when this is all said and done, I could still very much use all of this for segments and all that good stuff and abridged. But if I don't, well, uh, yep, it does happen. Thank you so much. So like I was saying, with the fear of failure or fear of success, which one stops people more? Um, I personally, I think the fear of failure, for me, that's a me thing. But I think the other thing was, like I said about YouTube, was it's really one live at a time, and I didn't want to get overwhelmed with thinking a year down the road, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road. It was just about doing the lives, getting myself out there, using my voice, hopefully communicating with you all watching, and just doing my best in that regard. And I think that's also the part of the fear of success, because what if this is successful? What if there's a lot more people on this chat that I'm ready, to handle? And then you have to kind of grow with that success, which is a lot more work, a lot more like studying, a lot more skills to learn, and a lot more frustration. So I think that's where the overwhelm could come in, depending on if you're fear of failure or fear of success. And so, yeah, yeah, definitely the overwhelm. Like I said, I had perfectionist tendencies that tended to stop or hinder me from doing things, because I had high expectations of trying to do things way up here, even if it's like, hey, getting it done, it counts. So I think that's part of going back into celebrating the small wins. Um, Eating healthy or eating better, eating healthy, or going for a walk, or even like saying hi to somebody when you're like, "Ooh, I'm nervous," but maybe I just do a smile and like a slight nod. That counts. You did it. And maybe even catching yourself when you're doing like negative self-talk. Then you realize you caught yourself and you're like, "No, no, no, we don't do that anymore," or something. Those are the small wins. Celebrate those, because progress over perfection. Like the little things do matter, and I think they do slowly. What it give you that little dopamine, so your body is like, "Oh, that was nice. That was pleasant." So let's talk about resistance, the invisible wall. Resistance is kind of an interesting way of putting it, because if people think of resistance, they may not. That's to me, when I was studying for this and kind of like rehashing some of these words, I think a lot of people, resistant doesn't show up as like, "Ooh, I just don't want to do that." It's usually there's something underlying why you don't want to do it. Be it you feel like lazy about it, you're scared of it, or you're like really nervous or overwhelmed by something. So resistance is like, for me, a like curious word. Dennis said, those you can see now, but I don't know if it's a fear of failure or change, but I definitely had resistance that is very difficult to overcome. Maybe executive dysfunction-esque. Yep. That's a truth. That's true. If you are neurodivergent in any way, executive dysfunction, that could play a role where your brain just does not line up things as someone who is not neurodivergent. And that's kind of a way that you have to look into to figure out how do you work, not only in the sense of everyone's individual, but in a more special way of people have studied this, and maybe there are things that people have realized, people in this demographic or people in this lifestyle or people with this quote unquote condition or neurodivergent, um, this technique seems to work better or best. So that's something like, and I think it goes back to celebrating the small wins. That can help retrain your mind to, accept yourself, love yourself, not have shame and guilt around things, but to be like, okay, I did the thing. Small wins and small progress is positive. When it comes back to resistance, and speaking of resistance, I think for me personally, it has shown up more as, I want to say, not laziness per se, since with my new body, with how my health is and things, I've learned that fatigue is a thing, and a lot of people do deal with that. And so it's kind of like this weird push and pull of realizing, when is it legit resistance where I'm just trying not to do something, and when is it actually my body being fatigued and my mind being tired and telling me, hey, maybe you should rest. That has been difficult a difficulty for me to, determine which one is which. But to the chat, what's the hardest thing for you to start? Even though you love it once you begin, what's something hard for you to start, but you generally enjoy it? Personally, for me, it's video editing. That's why we're doing lives. But no, there will be abridged versions of these lives coming out. So if you enjoy the live sometimes, or you just can't make it all the time, there will be abridged versions coming out every Sunday of previous lives, as well as some segments every like Saturday and Wednesdays, rolling out in the very near future. But yeah, the hardest thing for me to start usually is editing. Once I'm doing video editing, I'm having a great time. I'm learning new little tricks or trying to like see the vision in my head of how smooth I want something to work, or when I want the music to do this, or I want the fade in or the fade out to happen. And then when I see it come together, I love it. But getting me to sit here and actually, sit here, take the time to do it, it does get frustrating, as well as overwhelming to think of editing like a full hour video and making it 20, 25 minutes. What do you cut? What do keep in, and things like that, and like how to put everything together for it to make sense. But usually once I'm in there, um, we're having a good time. And I think one of the things we also deal with when it comes, chat popped up. Um, Anything I know, Dennis states, anything I know that will be productive or positive in my life, self-sabotage. Yes. Um, I think it's also because, there may be more work to be done. Once something is started, maybe it's a habit you're trying to build, or like, a lifestyle change. It could be self-sabotage in the way that, in your mind, you may frame it as this is going to be more work, but it may be better for you in the long term, because once it becomes a habit or more so ingrained in what you do, it's easier. Like, I think that's kind of like when people start usually an exercise routine. A lot of people don't want to do it. You get sweaty, you're feeling exhausted, all that stuff, but also finding the time to do it, and consistently so. And it takes time to get it ingrained. But once you find the time, you find the workout you actually enjoy. You start getting better at it, be it a sport or an actual exercise routine. I think that's when people, it becomes a part of who you are, and that's when it becomes easier. But depending on who you are, it could take a week or two. It could take a month. It could literally take a year, and you're still like, man, I don't enjoy this. But you're doing it consistently because maybe you scheduled a good time of a flow of when you do this and you do that, and it just made sense. Maybe you still don't enjoy getting sweaty or out of breath, or the workout you're doing just isn't it, and you tried quite a few, but then also long-term health-wise, you're getting the benefits. So it's kind of one of those things. Dennis said, that's a good point. For me personally, a lot of new things I try usually end up being an added responsibility with no end in sight yet. For me personally, the added responsibility with no end in sight in my personal life is laundry. It's a constant. The clothes are clean. I have to put them away at some point or organize them in some way. And then there's the clothes are now dirty, and it's just an endless cycle. But like that is life, where there's just processes and things you have to do, like cooking for yourself is one of them. Um, you have to eat, you have to cook, you have to wash dishes, you got to go buy groceries. It's a process, but I think that's part of, I think, with mindset of being present and enjoying the now. Like, you don't think about, I am hungry. You think, I'm hungry, I'm going to cook this. You don't think about, oh, then I have to wash this and then I have to buy this later. You try to enjoy the moment for what it is. And like, especially once you cook the food, to enjoy that process of eating the food and enjoying yourself. So I think that probably goes back into mindset and being present in your life. Uh, I think for me personally, it was part of the whole YouTube thing was because I've suffered with social anxiety pretty much my whole life, pretty much since 8-year-old. I was like, ooh, what is this extra nervousness happening? So like a lot of stuff happened from 8 onwards of just nervous, realizing it's extra nervousness, trying to hide. It was, and then realizing, oh, this is social anxiety. Got it. So I think for me, one of the biggest things once I got in my 30s, and had my daughter and try to figure out who I was again, was figuring out to do the things that always scared me, or I was hesitant to do. And one of those is like public speaking, connecting with others for them getting to know me as well as getting to know them. It's a two-way street. There's judgment that can be had when someone gets to know you or you get to know them. There's also emotions of if someone gets to know you and they generally just don't like you. That kind of is like a personal slight, but obviously not everybody gets along with everybody. So it's one of the things to come into terms with that and accept it. But also, I think with the YouTube aspect, it was like, what's worse, failing publicly or failing privately? Like if I tried to do things on my own in a more private way, if I failed, it could just be in my head that no one else needed to know my business. But obviously doing YouTube where their videos are, they're out here, I'm doing my thing. What if this never, no extra subscribers, the lives don't ever make any more than like 10 people are watching. But at the same time, what is the point? The point is, my own growth, my own self showing up, speaking, um, getting practice public speaking in a way, speaking my truth, being authentic, getting my thoughts out there, and my own self growth. So even if not that many people join, which I fingers crossed that this continues to grow and I continue to get better at this and get more interaction and all that good stuff. Part of it is the fear of, people of being afraid of failing publicly. So I think a lot of things that we want to succeed in life, a lot of things in our current culture, be it like money wise, be it jobs and prestige and things like that, it is more of a public aspect, especially now with like social media being such a normalized part of our life. People sharing everybody's business all the time. So that could be a definite fear as well as a resistance in the sense of your ego taking the hit and the fear of being like publicly shamed, publicly guilt, or feeling like you're failing in a public setting, I think. Whew. And I think speaking of that, the fear of change. Essentially change equals, ego death. We've talked about ego quite a bit as like a lot of times why we are scared of something, we don't want to, we fear it, or we're worried. It's because our ego, the person we believe we are on the inside. I think that goes into like I've talked about this before. I'm a psychology gal. Carl Jung, him himself, have put a lot of research, and I think he even has like the Red Book, which I haven't read it yet, but he talks a lot about the shadow self, the self that essentially you push so deep down because either society, your family, people around you, either shame got to you, guilt got to you, maybe it was too much for others. It could be a positive stuff, it could be negative stuff. Either way, it was shoved deep in there. And part of his psychology is part about integration, where you identify the shadow self, you find out who you were more or less meant to be. The ego, strip away all those self beliefs that you thought of because other people put those on you, and it wasn't necessarily your own thoughts. It wasn't necessarily who you were born to be, but what society or your family or your friends put on you. And I think there was a metaphor that other people, like I read a metaphor one time about, I don't think it was particularly talking about the shadow, but it was talking about the things society or your family and friends put on you. And it was like someone gave you a pair of shoes and you're like, okay, these are my shoes now. It's like, yeah, sure, they're your shoes now. Someone gave you a pair of pants. You're like, oh, these are my pants now. These are mine. But then someone gave you a coat or a t-shirt and then another coat. And sometimes they're after coat, a different pair of pants. You were just layering these on because they were just giving them to you. And like, oh, now you have on 3 hats. You have on 5 coats. You have on 3 shirts. You have on 2 pairs of pants and like a pair of boots when it's like sunny outside. Those weren't all you. So it's like figuring out, okay, I don't need that hat. That's not my hat. This is not my coat. This is not my shirt. Things like that, and figuring out who you actually were underneath all those layers, like an onion. But figuring out who you were and that these aren't your items, like someone else put them on you. So when it comes to the shadow self, it's kind of that integration of figuring out what was put on you, but who you were to also not only what was put on you, but why it was put on you and how that it actually affected you and still may affect you. Dennis, but I like all the hats you may, but that's part of it. It's integration. It's not necessarily throwing things away. It's realizing how did this serve you at the time? Maybe that hat was given to you by your grandfather who was enlisted in the army when he was young and had a rough childhood. So he told you like, man up, you don't need to be doing this, like don't cry, and that stuff. And then you realize, okay, there are times when it's probably best not to cry because maybe you're trying to make a public speech, you're trying to like assert yourself in like a meeting, and even though you feel emotions well up, you're kind of like, okay, well, we shouldn't cry right now. They're going to take me less serious because they're like, why are you crying? And then, or you won't be able to finish your, your speech or your thoughts. And then, you'll feel like you didn't succeed. So that's why sometimes something like the hat would be like, okay, I'm going to keep that because I do know the purpose of it. So you put that in the closet in case I need it, but it's not like the thing I'm wearing all the time. So that's why it's about integration with the shadow self. It's figuring out what lessons you learned as a child or teenager or even young adult or even like last week, something that affected you that hit onto some other thing. And so there's like a whole like untangling of yarn that you need to do to process what happened recently untangle that, what happened in the past that was connected to it, and untangle that and figure it out. So I think that could be scary for a lot of people because you're gonna get in there. Um, but if you could guarantee that once you're done integrating the shadow self, getting through there, and it would turn out good, yeah. Roxanne, yes, we are talking in metaphors. I mean, I can get a piece of yarn and try to show an example, but I think you guys got what I'm saying. So a lot of times when it comes to the shadow self, it can tie into like the comfort of old pain, in the sense of what you're comfortable doing or being, and for some people that kind of stops growth because maybe they are comfortable where they are. You could think about exercise. They could be like, "Ooh, I should probably start running, or I should start, doing something." But then maybe you think, "Well, my body's okay right now." Maybe physically, aesthetically, you're like, "Nah, I look fine." Then maybe even actual physically, your body is holding up well. But maybe in 10 years, it may be not holding up. Maybe you'll start having some back problems, some knee problems, some muscle loss. As people age, that happens. So it's kind of one of the things, the comfort of being where you are instead of deciding to change. And I think some people hold on to that, even in like, I think therapy and like trauma work. Sometimes you hold on to like even the big traumas because that is what got you through some, moment in your young life or in your teenage years. Maybe you built, like for me personally, with the social anxiety, I kind of built a very hard shell around myself. And like I said much earlier, when my mic wasn't even on, um, I am still wondering if I'm quote unquote a highly sensitive person or just a very anxious lady. But all the years I'm not speaking, I did build like I guess a wall around myself. And so a lot of times my face is very much resting in the sense of don't talk to me, don't look at me, things like that. Like I'm not the friendliest looking person. Like that's something very easy for me to do. And so that's like the comfort of old pain in the sense that it helped me then with the social anxiety aspect and not wanting people to interact with me, not wanting to draw attention to myself. But now as an adult, now someone who does want to talk, who is fine with making friends or at least talking about deep subjects and just being willing to express myself in that way, um, holding on to it doesn't help anymore because obviously having a face that looks like "don't talk to me" will make people not want to talk with me. So things like that, and same with other trauma. Um, Maybe someone not crying, like holding in their emotions, was something that helped them when they're younger because maybe they came from a family or a background where it was like abusive in some regard, and maybe showing tears or crying was something that set off a parent where they would start yelling, they would start screaming, they'd be upset because that like either their nervous system couldn't handle it or they would get upset with that motion being shown. Like you learn to like stuff that so deep down. But then as an adult, maybe there are even like good moments in your life. Like maybe you end up having a child and you're like overwhelmed with emotion, or you're getting married, or you're celebrating your friend's birthday and they just went through chemo and you're like, I'm so happy that you're still here with us. And that emotion has been shoved down so hard though that people are like, are you happy? Are you okay? Because you just physically it seems like you can't. And I think that's part of the comfort of old pain, realizing all that stuff needs to come up. Because if you want to like go to the next step, or obviously this is just me talking, or to grow stuff like that, you actually need to like dig deeper and figure out where it came from, what's going on, and like do the work. And that that could be scary for a lot of people because maybe there are parts of your childhood you blocked out and you don't remember big chunks, and then you now learn, oh, that is a big was it a big indicator of some trauma happening. And then for some people, maybe you don't want to know what happened to you because that's a scary thing. But part of that is, integrating into the shadow work is figuring out all that stuff you may have forgot. Whose hat is this? Who gave you this coat? And then figuring out if you want to keep it, maybe for occasions when you may need it, or being like, no, I don't need this anymore. This isn't mine. So yeah, change and then shadow work, going back into like the ego death thing. It could affect a lot of people, and I think that's something that is scary for. I've seen it firsthand a lot of the times that the most volatile people I know tie a lot of who they are to, like, I guess, their ego. That's what is affected first. You can see it in their eyes, you can see it in their demeanor. That in a weird way, the most volatile people I know have also been the most sensitive, the most emotional, because anger is an emotion. And so it's really interesting when you kind of take a step back and realize that, because for a lot of time, the loudest person in the group, the most angry person, it's like, really, like, who hurt you? Like, it's very clear that there's like hurt and trauma and things like there. So once you get more into like psychology of it, I think shadow work and like healing yourself, you notice it more, and it's pretty noticeable for a lot of like, and a lot of people, and it's kind of sad. Yeah. So what do you think, chat? Is it scarier staying stuck forever or risking being someone new? 'Cause I guess with the ego death, the shadow work, being someone new, maybe you don't get along with your spouse anymore. Maybe they don't want to do the work, and you're like, oh, we're not, the value system isn't aligned. Or maybe the people you used to hang out with, which you consider like some of your closest friends, as you start changing and getting better, exercising, going on walks, or reading other books, you realize you have nothing in common with them anymore. Maybe you've known them since you were like in high school or in middle school or um, elementary school, and they were like lifelong friends, but then you realize maybe they're the ones who are changing either negatively or positively, depending on if they're integrating and learning who they are as people. And then you realize, so which is scary, staying stuck forever or risking being someone new? For me personally, I think staying stuck. Although it is, comfortable, it would be very comfortable just being quiet, not speaking my truth, and just staying like, nope, not saying anything, and just going back into my like hobbit hole, and then not um, sharing anything with anybody, and keeping my thoughts to myself. It would be comfortable, but it'd be a lot sadder for me personally on my own journey to be like 70 years old and never connected fully with certain family members or friends or people I wouldn't realize I would meet. Dennis says, if you're comfortable where you're stuck, then it's definitely less scary than meeting someone new. But oftentimes I think if you're stuck, you don't know what new things could await. Yes. I think that also goes into mindset. If you're stuck in one of those, you know, was it the loop? I discussed it a little bit earlier, but I don't know if my mic was on. It's the slow self-worth loop. If you're stuck into negative self-talk, negative behavioral patterns, maybe people you're around are doing all that. Yeah, it can be very scary. Um, Roxanne states, I don't know, but growing up so long, I noticed my closest friends changed with me. I became well aware of some of my inner self and telling my family more how I feel. Yeah. That's actually great when you see growth in yourself and the people around you, and everyone's different in their own journey, and everyone's going through different things. But when the journey of self growth and awareness of what you're open to talking about is on similar paths, that's great when you see people growing together. I think that's also part of like marriage and things like that, where hopefully as spouses you grow together and are willing to meet each other each step of the way. Ricardo, stuck. Life, in my opinion, is a constant state of change, even if we don't live long enough to see change. If you see things as static, it is unnatural to me. Yes. When you go back into like how the world literally works, not the systems we built, but how the literal natural world is, change is a constant. Either weather patterns, animals, life and death is a whole cycle, and usually it's life, death, rebirth. Things aren't just permanent. So yeah, when you see things on the grand scale, even I think cosmically, it definitely, yeah, change is the constant. being the same person you were, that's actually the death. That's actually the unnatural aspect. So a lot of people, I think, when you put in that lens, those who are stuck as the same person they were when they were, say, 15 or 20, and now they're 45, 50, that's unnatural. Like, I would say something, traumatic may have happened in their lives, or there's a lot of systemic as well as cultural or individual issues going on that may have kept them there. Ricardo then states it's the idea that things are a certain way and that they can't change, as opposed to all things are constantly moving and changing. So there's nothing wrong with growth and change, yes. And I think currently, if I were to get a little bit political in our current culture, if you are up on what's currently happening in like politics and current administration stuff, there's a lot of pushback of things not changing, as we saw like a decade or so ago with Obama being president. His slogan was change, and it was a pretty big deal, an African American president and all that stuff. And there was a lot of quote unquote people saying it wasn't racist, but there was undertones of racism going on, of wanting his birth certificate and all that stuff, and him to prove that he was actually like born here and everything. Um, but then now there's a lot of pushback for traditional family values and things that aren't really traditional, because when you go back, it was like 1954 when the XYZ was established, or 1967, which isn't that very long ago. It was not really, it wasn't like back in like 1378 that this tradition was established or something. But anyway, Roxanne says, I don't like watching news. But yeah, right now it's a little wild out there. So for most people with not liking to watch the news, it's sort of like find one or two news sources that you actually trust. Personally, PBS is something I enjoy, where give my little snippets here and there, and I love reading the comments to see what other people are talking about. But currently, PBS does not have any federal funding. It was literally pulled from them when it was already signed, because they were not complying with the state propaganda. They were going to tell the news as the news. So just FYI, if you support PBS, donate some dollars to them, or watch their view and give them views and stuff, because they're still doing their best, and they're not going anywhere. That's what they've stated. Anyways, just my 2 cents on that. Roxanne said they want control. Yes. That goes into a lot of things, but yes. I think people, when people are afraid of change, it goes back to being, control. Gonna say it's same, but something that scares me more than the news is being blindsided by all the things that have happened when you weren't looking. Yet that is concerning, because there's a lot of people right now who, if I think if you don't want to concern yourself with the big picture of the news, because just like a lot of things, when you look at it too large, it can get very overwhelming, as I personally get overwhelmed a lot. So you got to go to, was it the micro of it? I'm not sure, like economically, like macro, micro, they like switch the words a little bit, but the small aspect of being the change you want to see in the world, like start working on yourself. So when you talk to friends and family, you are open to change. You are open to ideas and connecting. You like genuine connected, like you meet them with curiosity and an open heart. That type of thing makes a big difference. And then even if your family is not the most receptive, because I mean, they're not super growth oriented, or your friends, finding those people, like this is part of it, is these lives is connecting with others and finding those ideas. And you find groups online, as well as local groups like family that are with schools and things like that, to make those small connections to make everyone's life a little bit better. And then if something does happen largely that does affect your community, like immediately you have those connections already made, that trust has already been built. Ricardo says it's important to know what's going on in the world, especially as a full contributing member of society, but it's the idea that things are a certain way which makes change seem radical. Yet Dennis is so true. Yeah, it's the idea of things being set in stone. Yeah, that gets a little wild. I think if you look at the universe, you look at life, change is the norm, like Ricardo stated or mentioned. So thinking of things changing may not necessarily be a bad thing. And I think a lot of people, that's part of the fear and the ego, and the shadow work not being integrated, and asking themselves what you really value. Who are you really? Like even I think when it comes to, who gave me this hat, who gave me this coat, the metaphor analogy, I don't know the difference between them. I should probably look that up to figure that out. But a lot of it could also be like societal, in the sense of maybe you were raised Christian or Catholic or Buddhist and things like that, that that could be a value system that you hold, but then you may realize, wait a second, I really don't care about that. Or you logically, it's like something you should care about, but you're like, you know what? Nope, I really don't. And then so you don't need to wear that coat anymore. Type of thing. Dennis says, sorry, didn't mean to derail the topic with politics. That's totally fine, Dennis. Every opinion is an opinion, and we're still open, and this is a safe space to, talk and get it out there and just discuss stuff. And, I'm obviously voicing my opinion, and some of the stuff obviously is like other works of other people, so I'm still giving insight and things like that. But if anybody wants to really talk politics, and maybe one of these days on a live, it'll just be like, we're doing it. Give me your best and worst, and let's just break it down. um, but I think when it comes to a lot of Roxanne said no. When it comes to a lot of things, I think what's been harder, forgiving your past self or trusting your future self? Because I think depending on where we've been and where we're going and the growth and either shadow work or therapy or things we've had to all go through or figure out, sometimes you weren't the best person. And that's I think, the part of change and ego is not only are you identifying things from like childhood, maybe you couldn't do anything, you were a child, or even you were a teenager. What did you know? So maybe you were 22, 28, 35, 46 or something. And some of the mistakes you made were very much your mistakes. And I think that goes back to the ego, knowing that, yeah, maybe you were at fault. Maybe you're the one who fudged up. And So I think that goes into, forgiving yourself, and, but then also, trusting your future self. If you're making the legitimate changes, maybe you're not ready to like confront someone and say, I apologize for my behavior. And maybe you might be relieved. Maybe they'll say like, oh, I don't even remember that. Or maybe they'll be like, yeah, that really did affect me, and thank you. But trusting your future self to be able to handle that, whichever way it goes. And I think that could be pretty rough depending on like what sins you may feel you bear, kind of thing. Ricardo states, even with something like religion, the major three, Islam, Christian, and Judaism, have very similar core tenets of being kind and giving and tolerant. Yeah. And that's something that is so wild. Sorry, going back to politics. It's so wild right now. Considering like those are the core things. And I think that's why I went back to what is your actual value system. Because depending on your religious background, those are coats or hats or shoes or pants that someone else gave you, and you're like, yeah, that sounds good. But then when, like what they say, put your money where your mouth is, or what you actually do, you're like, ooh, that wasn't very kind of you. Or like, those type of things, learning that maybe you're not the nicest person. And you're like, and is that okay? And maybe you're like, actually, yeah, that's okay with me. I'm okay with that. Or you're like, ooh, I'm not okay with that. And maybe you realize, oh, I'm actually helping bad people do bad things. Let me, take a step back and do the small things. Like me personally, I discussed this with a family member recently. I do not eat at Chick-fil-A. I think numerous years ago, there was a whole thing where they found out the owner of Chick-fil-A, he's like against like the LGBTQ community, because homosexuality in the Old Testament was considered like you don't homosexual behavior is like a no, but also it's called it wasn't called homosexual behavior, it's called sodomy, which for those who don't know, technically that includes oral sex as well as the physical aspect of things. So it's a lot of people committing sodomy out there. But that's also Old Testament. In the New Testament, Jesus was like, "Oop, you don't have to worry about that stuff. Just ask for forgiveness. If you want, be kind, do the good." Pretty much, Jesus was like about less about the lip service of it, and actually like, no, do better. The actions count. Do the good, right? And so I personally don't eat at Chick-fil-A, and then because of that. But when he was told that a lot of his very large donations, probably this guy is a multimillionaire, maybe even a billionaire at this point, a lot of his very large donations were funding hate groups, groups that literally commit crimes against people in that community who are there. The law is actually in it's official. And then he stated that he didn't care, that he'll do what he wants with his money. So a lot of people decided, oh, he doesn't actually care. But I do care because, it's like you're giving him your money. Um, and then he's using it for XYZ, which it may not be something aligned with your values and stuff. So I totally forgot the whole point of this, but that was the value system. So like for me, my personal values is I don't want anybody to do something with money that I give them, especially when I am well aware that they're doing real bad. Like as a person, I would not want to talk to that person, or I would not really be like, I don't think we have the same value system. So yeah, so that was just me personally. So it's kind of one of those things to identify who you are and what your actual values are. So when it comes to like religion and religious texts and things, does that really matter to you? Does someone being a sodomist matter that much to you, or does it matter more of them being a human being with a conscious, with a soul, with inalienable rights? Does that matter more? So yeah, it's kind of one of those things. Learning who you are as a person and going into that deep shadow work and figuring out what your actual values are, what you actually don't care about. Um, excuse me. Yeah, yeah, that's my 2 cents, and that's one of my little nuggets about Christianity. Is I think a lot of people, especially if you go to a franchise church, don't realize a lot of it's been kind of corrupted or used for other things, where like make you feel good during that time. But a lot of like you see mega churches and you're like, what good works are you doing, sirs? Like where's this money actually going? And so that's the danger of that. Is like you may feel good at the time and be like, no, I'm with we're doing fellowship, we're worshiping, but what good are you actually doing in the world? And not good in the sense of, yeah, we're making it like the Bible. The Bible said this, but no, like actual good, clean drinking water for people, giving people clean, healthy food, feeding children, trying to make sure no one's actually homeless, giving people, like treating people as human beings, like as Jesus, trying to feed as many people as possible, washing people's feet literally and stuff like that. So Roxanne says she was more afraid of her past self. Oh, forgiving your past self. Yeah, like I said, depending on quote unquote what sins you may bear. Uh, it could be a lot. Whether it goes back to the shadow and ego and being honest with things that you messed up. It's totally, everyone makes mistakes. Some are big, some are little, but yeah. Roxanne also say, looking back, I should have been more vocal on things that were happening, so I didn't have to fit the way someone else wanted me to fit. Yep. Someone gave you a hat, and you were like, I guess this is my hat. But now you're like, I don't even like this color. And I think there's good in that, like like identifying your values, identifying boundaries, and when they were crossed, and actually realizing like things for next time. I think there's actually like a way to like there's actually like a mental exercise for like helping regulate nervous system stuff, like forgive yourself and that type of thing, where it says there is power in like a person's mind. Like we know the placebo effect, where people are not even given a medication but are told they're given a medication and they get better. So, and Roxanne states, I didn't and I ran away. LOL. It was hard, but it was for the best. Yeah. Sometimes, that's a legitimate thing. But part of the whole exercise that they have people do sometimes, especially if like someone had trauma in like childhood and things like that, where there was nothing you could do, is like is reenacting it in your mind of maybe you wanted to speak up, maybe you didn't say what you want to say, but just reenacting it in your mind as you wish it would have gone is a part of rewiring the neurons in your brain as well, to give yourself a healthy outlet of wishing, like, I wish I would have said this, and maybe I would have had a connecting moment, or maybe I just would have felt more empowered in that moment. And if you just fully reenact that moment in your mind and go through it, that can help you let go of the shame or guilt or forgive your past self, in some capacity, like it does mentally help. So that's one of those exercises that they give people to do, um, as long as they're ready to actually, process emotion and a memory. Ricardo says, I'm kind of in the same boat as Rox. I do have a lot of regrets and anger towards both myself and parents, despite being young, and my parents also being young, but because that's how things happened, doesn't mean that that's how things needed to be or cannot change. Yeah. It does not, just because things happen that way does not mean that was the best way. It doesn't mean, like, I think part of that, the shadow work and the changing equals, ego death, is knowing that the shame and the guilt tied to things that, one, if they weren't in your control, is one thing, but even if they were in control and maybe you didn't feel you showed up the best, it's just maybe writing it down too and apologizing to yourself. Maybe saying like, I'm sorry that I didn't show up that way, the way I wanted to. And then, just holding space for those emotions at that time because, that can help you heal in that regard too. Um, so how we move forward, it's called, self-awareness, part of identifying the issues you may have had. I think it's awareness, acceptance, and action. Be aware of positive and negative things that, the sins you bear more or less, and the things you should be or can be held accountable for, like being aware of things you messed up or you did great on, but then accepting that it is what it is. You can't change the past. You can't just, live in the future. You kind of in the now. And then it's the action of changing. So next time you don't make the same mistake, next time you do it a little differently. So if it ever happens again, you do speak up or you do, set your boundary. You do, leave the situation if that's the case. Roxanne says, I learned to talk to my family and friends more, even if they didn't agree the way I thought. It made me feel heard and so on and so in control of my life. Yes. Even if people don't agree with you, that's fine. It's one thing if people don't agree on like major value system of yours, but it's still like fine. Ricardo states both of my parents have grown and matured so much, but I feel stuck and self-sabotaging despite recognizing the patterns. But that's why I personally want to start living as soon things are changing. Yeah, it goes back to being the change you want to see in the world. Even if it seems hard because it's very overwhelming, you can do the small steps. So maybe like Ricardo with you and your family. Um, Maybe you're the one to say like maybe your dad's having a rough day and you can tell. And then you just say, all right, you feeling okay? And that is the bridge for him to be like, yeah, I'm fine. Or you can do like the shoulder pad or whatever. I don't know. But like those little things do make big differences. And that's how you slowly, so maybe the third or fifth time he's upset about something, you say, are you feeling okay? He may actually say what happened. So it's like those little bridges just get met. They don't happen instantly. Like a flower doesn't bloom overnight unless you have a weird plant. But, it'll grow where you water it pretty much. So like the little things matter. Ricardo, I'll say I have trouble turning the switch from things are bad and I was hurt to I'm my own person, do the work. Yeah. Yeah, it's like when you're stuck in that limbo of who you were and who you could be. But I think, like you said, Ricardo, change doesn't happen overnight, but change is the natural state. So the change does occur just, the small steps at a time. And every time you catch yourself kind of living in the past or trying to respond in a way that is not growth oriented or like you're not in that danger or that mindset anymore, to be like, give yourself that grace to be like, take a step back. And, the small wins do matter. And then self compassion is super important. Roxanne says, I used to write letters to my parents. Yeah, that's one of those things. It doesn't even, sometimes it's better not to send things to people because you're generally getting it all out. It's more for your own benefit, but to write it out is a way to get it out. And it's no longer like manifest, like just remunerating in your head and just going in there. You have an outlet. That's great. I think some people do art and paint and then draw what they're feeling instead. And that's a totally legitimate way to do that. Um, Roxanne says, and it felt like that. Sorry, it's a little hard to read, but used to write letters to my parents, and I left it like that. So see if they can understand how I was feeling to help. Yeah, and that's also one thing. Communication. Like if you are someone like me who has social anxiety, obviously text message was great for me. In like my first relationship because I was able to like to text the longest text ever, but get it out there. And then you can write letters and some of them you can send, some of them they're more for your benefit and just for your outlet. But that's when I think it's also important to write letters to yourself, to forgive yourself, to let yourself even know where you felt you failed yourself and things like that. To I think they do that in like um, 'cause some people not confused, but shadow work kind of to inner child work, and where you apologize to your child self of things that you wish things would have turned out differently, or if you would have had someone there for you. And I think for me, I had a conversation with one of my friends a few years ago, I think, um, I always imagined someone helping me in the sense of being this amazing person who could be really helpful and help me, like mentorship type of thing. And I told him, now that I am this age and doing all this self growth, I realized maybe the person I was imagining is me. Like, if I am capable of growing, learning all this stuff, taking time to figure these things out and help others, along their journey and just share what I've learned, maybe that mentor, that hero, that person I always imagine being super awesome can in some aspect be the person I become. So maybe me when I'm 55 is like, oh yeah, she knows a lot of stuff. So that'd be great. Um, Ricardo, be the person that you needed as a kid. Yes. Dennis states, actually, some of the best time I've experienced changing my life is leaving a message to myself via video recording. Yeah, that's one of those ways too. Video recordings, you leave them for your good times and your bad times, so you can help yourself literally learn self-compassion. I think there's also a therapy exercise where they have people like, whenever you're feeling down, you don't know who to talk to, or you don't have anybody to talk to, literally go look in the mirror. Look in the mirror, talk to yourself, look yourself in the eye, say, how are you feeling? What's going on? And that could help you not only mentally feel better, but also get it out and then maybe even solve some issues of what is actually, blocking you, or what is actually stopping you from communicating with someone else, or some issue like that. So yeah, those are definitely things. And also, even just looking at yourself and smiling and saying hi, and then giving yourself a compliment, that could help, because maybe someone hasn't complimented you in a while, and that could help with like the self love, self compassion, seeing your own face and knowing like that's you. And I think that's something I personally have done, because you're trying to feel better and just be like, hey. And since having my child, mom, wife, all that stuff, I physically do not look like I remember myself in my 20s. So just seeing myself smiling and being like, we're doing it. You do you, buddy. We're doing great, is, just something to do, a little pick me up. Roxanne states, I do that a lot in the morning. It helps boost my day. Yeah. I think some people like, was it Mel Robbins even suggest like, giving yourself like the morning high five in the mirror. Like, we're doing great, buddy. Cause she herself had trauma from when she was a child, because she's mentioned this in like numerous podcasts of hers, that she was like abused as a child, in the mornings, or in sleep wasn't a safe space. So for herself, the mornings are really rough, because a lot of that trauma just comes back as the mornings being like bad. And so she has to, get up and, she said she literally slides herself out of bed. Like, that's the safest she can feel, is just like sneakily getting herself out of bed. Suddenly she's on the floor and she's like, I'm out. And then she's like, and then getting up, getting her workout clothes on, but then looking at herself in the mirror and being like, we did it, buddy. We got out of bed today. Like those count. Those are like those small wins, celebrating the small wins and showing yourself self-love, self-compassion, and things like that. Totally counts. Um, wow, we're going a little long, it seems. Um, let's do like a little like, I guess, experiment for this week, when we're talking about like being the change you want to see in the world. Yeah, the win-win. Being the change you want to see in the world. What's one small thing, like not to overwhelm, very small, that you could take this week to kind of get out of your own way, or do to show yourself self-compassion. Maybe it's something you've been putting off for quite a while. Like for me personally, I've said it's in like a previous video. You guys only see this area like of the screen. There's a lot going on over there. That is a mess. And I have a family member moving in the next month, so I got to get on this. So I think one small step there would probably be probably moving some of the toys out and giving them to another family member, because that'll at least clear up some space. And then maybe some clothes. I don't know. We're not trying to stress myself out. So I think that's part of being in my own way. But then also, I don't know. Tomorrow there is going to be a game night at 7. The goal is 7 to 9. Last time we had a little hiccup at the very end, but that has been solved. I now know what to do if that happens again. We'll be playing Costume Quest, the little fun old style game, kid-ish. I don't really know, because it just looked interesting at the time, and now I'm like, I don't remember everything. But I also don't want to spoil it too much for myself, because I tend, like I said, I'm very detail oriented. I pick up on a lot of things, and I want it to be more of a fun, we're all surprised at whatever happens in the game. Roxanne says, getting my arts and crafts in order and start putting my ideas together to get my crickets her. Yep, that could be something, and either for personal or for funsies, but to keep it light, keep it fun, and don't get overwhelmed by the learning aspect of everything, one step at a time, beautify your space if that what makes you feel better and everything. All right. So tonight we talked about resistance, self-sabotage, and how, I guess, self-awareness can turn resistance and all that negativity into growth. Once you know who you are, what's going on internally, you can kind of the micro dose the positivity of having, like, how do we turn something into growth and work with yourself instead of against yourself. Because I spoke earlier, not sure if my mic was on, but about physically when I was trying to get back into shape, work out, do all the things I did in my 20s before my daughter. I was just trying to force my body to fit in the place that I remember it being able to fit. And then learning that that was pretty much self-sabotage. I wasn't that person anymore. Physically, mentally, emotionally, she's gone. Rebirth has happened. And so learning how to work with yourself and knowing where you are. Like I learned one, vitamin and nutrition was paramount to my health and wellness, and then also slowing it down to doing basic strength training just to gain some strength, getting used to walking again, getting used to holding in my core. I had to start the small core work, and it was rough. Yeah. I remember very keenly doing something like the figure 4 stretch where you just put your leg over your knee and stretch. My lower abs activated and we're like, oh, we can barely hold this stretch for 10 seconds. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's that bad. So that's part of, like, learning to work with yourself and not against yourself is something I personally struggled with, but I've learned a lot. And so I think all of us, that's something we've learned. Don't overwhelm yourself. Progress over perfection. Little steps you count. um, so yeah, and self-compassion and stuff. So for the chat, drop a word in the chat to discuss how do you feel about change right now? Do you still feel it's a scary thing? Are you feeling open to it right now? Do you feel it's possible? I think it's possible. Yeah, I feel personally good about change right now. Like, everything changes and that's okay. And the personal growth, self-awareness, all that good stuff is good. And I'm excited. Maybe, like, even talking about the channel and trying to figure out what I'm doing here. We're doing our best. And Dennis said, yes, scary AF, but it is needed. So yeah, it can still be very scary. I think next week, oh no, memory. That's something too. Once I had my daughter, my memory was never quite the same. Uh, there was maybe a handful of times in my whole younger life, first 30 years of life, that I remember forgetting a word mid-sentence. Now it happens at least a handful of times a week. That's been a bummer for me personally, as my memory and my mind is one of the key things of myself that I enjoy the most. Very active in there. And so when I can't discuss a thought or finish a thought or I lose a thought, I'm just like, well, dang it. Roxanne says, more open now than before. I actually like change better. Even though life happens and it's scary, I will love to live. I will love to live the fullest. Yes. Change is scary, but I think maybe in the end it is scarier to not change. And then Roxanne, mom brain fog. Yes. So yes, please like this video. It really does help. Subscribe if you haven't already. And join me next Tuesday. It'll be Tuesday at 7 p.m. For another hour, maybe a little more. As we get more comfortable and more interaction, we may go into 2 hours if more people are showing up and obviously more conversation and flow is happening. Then, of course, we'll extend time because I can. But we're going to be diving into dreams, the subconscious, and the soul. So that will be very interesting for us to figure out, what do our dreams actually mean? Do they mean anything? What are your dreams? Literal weird things that have happened in dreams, to the subconscious, what your mind is trying to tell you and how like science as well as spirituality sees those, and then the soul, how that all can tie into your dreams, your subconscious, and that connection to either the physical, the spiritual, or religion in any aspect. So, so thank you all for joining me today. I'm super happy that we had a great conversation, as that is the whole point of all this, is interacting with all of you and learning from each other and growing together. So I'll see you next time. Like I said, like and subscribe, and see you all next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Follow me on Instagram as well. It's Angela and then some. And have a lovely rest of your evening. And I hope you all have like the best. See you next time. Bye.